State Affairs meeting for February 1st. First thing on our agenda is, do we have any bill introductions? Go ahead, step up, state your name, and then does he have an RS number?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. My name is John Reagan, a citizen of Kansas. I'm here to introduce Bill 22-RS-2421 for the revision to the Kansas lemon law, basically to update the way the calculation is made for use fee when they reduce the refund for personal use of the vehicle.
Any questions by the committee? Not seeing any. Any objections? Bill's introduced. Can you get with Michael and make sure he's got your information? You're right, Jason? Are there any other bill introductions? Not seeing any. We'll go ahead and move into today's presentation concerning election integrity. I heard this over this last year. I went to an event down in Wichita. Want to learn more about it. I thought it's something that, we need to hear from the public. We've got a lot of election bills that are going to be teed up over the next 2 or 3 weeks and the rest of this session in this committee. We might have a slow week towards the end of this week because we might cancel the meetings because of the snow coming. So we'll have to reschedule some of them, but there's probably 10 or 12 election bills and a lot of them will be heard. So you guys, after today, you might want to chime in on some of them bills. You might want to testify. So first up, we'll start with Representative Randy Garber.
Thank you, Chairman Olson, members of the committee. It's a privilege to stand in front of you today and give a testimony concerning the election integrity in Kansas. I have passed out slides to each of you, and we are not going to go over the national statistics that show there was probably election fraud all over the nation. We are going to concentrate on Kansas. I did get the slides from Seth Keshel. Seth Keshel was an Army intelligence officer and served our country in Afghanistan from 2010 to 2011. Served 6 years, attained the rank of captain. It's unfortunate he couldn't be here today to testify, so he graciously gave me the opportunity to share some of his slides with you. So we're going to go directly to Kansas. That's page 2 of the testimony. At the bottom of the page, it says, "What about Kansas? Is there evidence that suggests there were problems in our state?" I believe after you see these slides, you will agree with me that there is evidence that there were some irregularities in Kansas. The first slide is slide number 6 in your packet. It's a graph that shows the Republican and Democrat registration statistics. The slides are numbered. So slide 6 shows the statistics for voter registration, both Republican and Democrat. As you can see, in 2008, we had a very popular Democrat candidate named Barack Obama, so the registrations went up significantly. However, in 2012, he wasn't quite as popular as he was in 2008, so that shows the registrations going down. 2018, both parties, they continue to slide down. 2016, President Trump was an unknown. People were skeptical about what he was going to do. And so both party registrations decreased. However, in 2020, we see an interesting indication that President Trump was a very popular president, and we see the rise in the Republican registrations, significant rise. However, what we also see is a significant rise in the Democrat registration. To me, that's an anomaly. Could it be coincidence? It could be. Could it be something else? That's something we hope to find out in this legislative session. Slide 7 shows the Kansas counties where Mr. Keshel is convinced we had some out-of-the-ordinary results. 2 of those counties, Sedgwick and Johnson, are in red. There are 7 counties in yellow where there might be significant fraud, and then the rest of the counties are in green, which there may be or may not be fraud in those areas, or irregularities, I should say. We haven't proven fraud at this point. Slide 8 gives us a vote tally of Johnson County for presidential elections from 2004 to 2020. The red numbers to the left indicate as a percentage how many more registered Republicans there are compared to Democrats in each election cycle. The white numbers to the right show the registration trends for Republicans and Democrats, and the numbers to the far right in parentheses shows the trend for all registered voters. Now, after 8 years, from in 2004, 2008, Bush 42 was going out of office. The electorate wanted change. And although John McCain won Johnson County, the margin of victory was only 25,536 votes than when Bush won re-election in 2004, which was over 60,000 votes. Obama won re-election in 2012. However, he lost support with the electorate, and the GOP candidate won by 47,000 votes. Trump won Johnson County in 2016, but he only won by a little over 7,000 votes. Keep in mind, Johnson County had not elected a Democrat candidate for the presidency since 1916. This was a close margin of victory for a new face in politics. This brings us to 2020. 2020, I believe Trump was very popular across the nation, and in Johnson County, he received 18,000 more votes than he did in 2016. The percentage of registered Republicans, however, dropped to 11.6%. That's what the statistics show. And it indicated an increase of Democrat voters of nearly 35,000 votes. We see in Johnson County moving to the left, according to these statistics, but is it enough for a Democrat victory in 2020? I could see possibly 30 to 35,000 vote increase in the Democrat side, which would put their candidate ahead of Trump by 5,000 to 10,000 votes. But if we look at slide 9, Joe Biden received 184,259 votes, nearly double what Barack Obama received in 2004, and much higher than Hillary Clinton received in 2016. So Democrats win Johnson County for the first time in 100 years. My question is, does it make sense? Let's move on to slide 10. And slide 10 shows Sedgwick County statistics, much like slide 8 did for Johnson County. We see again the popularity of Barack Obama in 2008 and the loss of excitement for him in 2012. And we see also that Hillary Clinton did even worse in 2016. Now, Trump received 2,000 less votes in 2016 than Romney did in 2012. However, in 2020, he gained 18,000 votes. So we have a popular incumbent president, President Trump, and an unimpressive, in my opinion, challenger. How many votes did Biden receive? Biden received 26,000 more votes than Hillary Clinton received in 2016 and garnered 95,870 votes. Trump easily won Sedgwick County, but how did Biden do so well? In my opinion, it doesn't add up. I would chalk it up to lack of integrity in our voting system. And while this testimony does not prove there were election integrity issues in these counties, I feel it raises enough doubt to warrant further action. The Kansas Legislature needs to call for a full forensic audit of Johnson and Sedgwick counties for the 2020 election. I would be happy to meet with anyone and discuss these further, and I will stand for questions at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Okay. Questions for Representative Garber? Not seeing any. Thank you. We'll go ahead and move on to Dr. Doug Franks.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
You were at the reckoning. I recognize you. That was a good day. I'm happy to be here. I've been traveling the country. I'm working with teams in 40 states. I'm not fighting this war in Kansas. These people are. And so I'm delighted to be here serving them today with you. I've been traveling in your state, meeting with county officials, and I plan to continue doing that. And for the way, it's dipping my finger in the water, the way the temperature's going, things are going to heat up in your state pretty good, pretty fast. So it's good that you guys are getting ahead of that. Take a proactive stance rather than a reactive stance. So what I'd like to do in my talk is I just want to show you overall how Kansas kind of fits in across relative to the rest of the country, and then I'll dive in a little deeper. So I'm going to keep the strategy really simple. About my slides. So after I sent the slides through Hannah about a week ago, I made a lot more analysis. So I've updated my slides, and I've given a new set to Representative Garber, and they'll give you a new set if you'd like to have them later. So I apologize, and a lot of my slides are animated, so those don't show up well on paper. So sorry about that. So I'm sorry, you'll have to direct your attention to the screen most of the time. All right. When I was working with the Pennsylvania State Legislature, they used to say to me, Dr. Frank, you got to explain it with crayons. We're politicians, they would say. And so then I would start explaining things, and they'd say, talk to us like we're 10 years old. And then they'd say, no, talk to us like we're 5 years old. Okay, so I'm gonna start with something really, really simple. This is a really simple thing. I'm going to show you how many people there are of voting age in every state in the country. Each one of these blue bars represents, and this is in alphabetical order. So here we are in Kansas. You can see right here. This is you guys. Looks like you have about little over 2 million people of voting age in your state, just by looking at the bar graph. What happens is then you can go to each Secretary of State website, and you can figure out how many people are registered to vote in each state. I'm going to give you this slide as well. Notice that when you look at your state, the blue bar, which is how many people you have of voting age, and the black bar, how many people are registered, are really close. So you've got most of your people registered in your state, and that's already a warning signal. But you're nothing compared to a lot of states, because 7 states have more people registered than they have people. Okay, so that's a problem. That doesn't make sense. And you're not one of those, but you're close. And the trend is, and I'll show you your trend, that you're headed that way because your registration rates are faster than your population. So you're eventually you're already pretty close. You're about to go over the limit where you'll have more people registered than you have people. And so there's an issue there. So that just kind of sets the stage. I'm not the first person to notice this. Judicial Watch published a report in October 2020 finding 353 counties in the United States had more people registered than they had people. So I'm not the first person to notice this, and you have some of those in your state as well. So heads up, that's coming. Now, why is this important? Well, I'm going to show you a graph of every state in the country. On the x-axis here, I've got starting from 50% on the left all the way to 120%, the percent of your voting age people that are registered. And it would be normal between 60 and 70%. And this is a good opportunity for me to mention something to you about canvassing. We're going to be doing a lot of canvassing in your state. And when you knock on people's doors, you say, are you registered to vote? Are you registered to vote? You go door to door and ask people. You typically find between 60 and 70% of your population is registered. That's a normal thing. So we would expect to see between 60 and 70%. Of course, if you have more people registered than people, that's silly. You can't, that's ridiculous. So that's the x-axis. And then on the y-axis here, I'm going to show you increasing percent of voting age people who voted. And if a state is low down here near the bottom, in other words, you have a lot of people registered, but it's a low turnout, it's probably not fraud. You've got dirty rolls, but only real voters are voting. You're vulnerable to fraud, but it's probably not fraud. If you're along the x-axis vertically here, then you have clean rolls, high turnout. That's probably the best situation. You got clean rolls, patriotic people, that's good. So up here in the upper left, that's good. That's probably the best situation. The bad thing is to be on the diagonal of this graph, where you get dirty and dirty rolls and higher turnouts. It means that dirty rolls, more and more turnout means you're going to have more and more ballot stuffing, more and more phantom ballots. That's the bad thing. So let's just kind of, here's simple math. I could teach differential calculus, but let's just keep it simple. Good bottom left, bad upper right. Simple math. So here are the 7 states that have more people registered than people. Maine, Vermont, Michigan, New Hampshire, Alaska, Kentucky, North Dakota. You're not one of them. But they obviously have more people registered than people. The bad thing is, look, they also have really high turnouts. So they've got more people registered than people plus a high turnout. That's a recipe for disaster. That's lots of phantom voters. Here is all 50 states, and you guys are right here, Kansas. You've got close to 90% of your people registered. As you saw in that first graph, you couldn't see, the two bars were too small. In the graphs that I've sent out to you, you'll be able to see that better. And then you've got somewhere about 65% turnout. So you can see you've got too many people registered, because we would know from canvassing, and then pretty high turnout. So you're like in the middle of the pack in terms of fraud, but you're definitely in the fraud zone. So that kind of sets the context. When did all this start? If I graph across the United States the elections since 1956 to present, you'll notice that the population in the U.S. just been going up pretty steady. But starting in the 90s, mid-90s, our registration rolls started increasing and the number of votes started increasing. There's a clear inflection point in those data. And what's happened is that's when we began implementing electronic systems all across the country, including Kansas. And so I'm going to show you in your own state also that problem. I'm going to jump ahead since I have less time today than I originally thought, but I'm going to show you one more thing out of the national thing. And that's that since 1996, the votes in the United States are also growing faster than the population, substantially more, and it works out to be about 10%, about 30 million more ballots we're having now than we should have if you were just to say it was tracking the population. Well, that 10% number all across, I find it in every state across the country. And I'm going to just jump ahead in my presentation to save some time for that, because I have a little less time than I thought. So let's go to Kansas. Here we go. So, and these slides will be in that packet that you can request if you'd like. So here's your population, for example, from the census. You notice that it was gradually increasing till about 2010, and then it's been pretty flat. Your population has been pretty steady. But your registrations, right from your own Secretary of State webpage, are been climbing faster that whole time. Even though your population's been relatively flat, your registrations are going up. That doesn't make sense. They should track. And not only are your registrations going up, your voting rates are also going up. And I can show you, these are numbers right off your Secretary of State website. That area, that red area, despite the fact the population is holding steady, your registrations are surging, so are your votes surging. And the number of voters is also increasing faster than your population. So these are danger signs. Doesn't prove any fraud, but statistically, ding, 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 warning, Will Robinson, you got more people registered than you should have registered, and more of them are voting. Something's going on. Now, from your own Secretary of State website, there's this lovely graph that you guys have up there where you show people voting by different methods. You've got early voting. This is a graph right off your state webpage. Advanced voting, and then inland election day voting, the three different kinds. I don't like this graph because it's kind of hard to compare, so I took your data and rearranged it. It's still the same data. You notice I've got three elections here. I'm showing you 2016 on the left, 2018. This one I think is in your packet. 2018 in the middle, and then 2020 on the right. And you notice that you have significant increase in mail-in ballots. That is the biggest leak for fraud in our country. I find it in state after state. That's your danger, mail-in ballots. So if you're going to be doing legislation coming up, that's what you need to plug that hole. Mail-in ballots are a huge vulnerability that you're vulnerable for. In fact, just in this last election, you can see that you have about 146,000 more ballots than you would normally have in an election. Just because, and you can see a large part of that is the mail-in. Okay, another thing you can see where there's a problem in your state. Let's say you go up to a county clerk and you say, can you give me a list of everybody, or you have election officials, they're called in your state, and you say, can you give me a list of everybody who voted in the election? And they'll say, sure, I'll give you a list. Let's just say for the sake of discussion, it has 1,000 people in it. So, okay, great, thank you for that list. And then you say, let's go to the Secretary of State website and find out how many people they think voted in your county. So the county official gave you 1,000, but when you look at the official number, it's 1,100. And so you'll go back to that county official and you'll say, wait a minute, there are 100 people more that voted, but they're not in your list. Usually the response to the county official is, well, that's normal, Dr. Frank. After the election, we always clean up the rolls. You know, we take off the inactive people, we take off the people that die and things. That's the usual answer. But then I always have to correct them. No, this is 100 voters. These are 100 people that voted that are not in your rolls. So no, they're not inactive, they voted. And they're not dead, they voted, okay? And they didn't move away, they voted. So, and it's only 2 months later. So you're missing 10% of your voters. That's a huge flaw in your system. And when you look at it, I have all of the rolls for your state, and I've added up all the voters in all of your rolls in all the state and compared it to your official numbers right off your Secretary of State website. There are 45,000 people who voted in your state, and you don't know who they are. 45,000. That's not trivial. I actually think the number is bigger than that. But that's just me taking your official number and that official number and subtracting them. I think it's actually much bigger. But we could argue about that, but can't argue about your own numbers. Your own numbers on your own website say that there are 45,000 people voted and you don't know who they are. That's a huge red flag. Okay. So I always tell the local folks to contact their election official and ask them for a list of everybody who voted. That's a really powerful way to go forward, because if they know who voted, they know who to canvass. The problem is that doesn't agree with the numbers that were sent to the Secretary of State. So then the local official realizes that usually for the first time, and then that starts a good discussion where instead of it being adversarial, where the citizens are attacking the local official, they're saying, wait a minute, who are all these people who voted? Let's figure out what's wrong with our system. And I already know the answer to that, but maybe you don't. Overall, the way the elections are being stolen, the pattern across the country is the registration rolls are inflated, like they are in your state. Ballots are being stuffed during the election, which is what I'm showing your lost votes as a clear symptom of. And then afterwards, there's cleanup. And that's usually due to manipulation of the voter rolls. And some of the speakers coming after me are going to show you that. That's it in a nutshell. Now, I'm going to jump ahead just a little bit here because I have limited time. The way they're inflating the rolls is they're using the census to do that. They're using the 2010 census. They shift the 2010 census 10 years, and that's their reference line. And I discovered that when I was working with the state of Pennsylvania. I proved to them, the Pennsylvania State Legislature, that their rolls were completely corrupted. They agreed. I spoke to a body just like this. They agreed. They agreed their rolls were so corrupted, they threw out their entire state database and hired a new firm. December 21st, they were hired to rebuild their entire state rolls. 3 days later, that firm was purchased by Zuckerberg. Okay. That was a devastating moment for me because I thought I just saved our country because I showed them that their election was completely hacked and they agreed. But then they covered it up. I was very disappointed. I was then in some of those lawsuits going from Montgomery County in Pennsylvania to the Supreme Court, and those cases were rejected. So I was very disappointed because I figured I'm trying to show everybody the election was stolen and everybody's agreeing, but nobody's doing anything about it. Then Mike Lindell met me and made moves about how I'd figured this stuff out. But let's not go down that road. The point is, I figured out the mathematics that they're using to inflate your rolls. Because of that, I can predict, and I'm going to jump ahead, because of that, I can predict every one of your counties in your state. I don't even need to know your rolls. I can just go to the United States Census, download the United States Census data, and I can predict how many 18-year-olds and how many 19-year-olds and how many 20-year-olds in every one of your counties. It's preposterous. I shouldn't be able to do that, but I can. Why? Because it's being controlled by computer algorithms. So, I'll just show you one example of that, and then I want to show you one more thing, and then I should yield the platform. I'm supposed to have 25 minutes. I'm doing pretty good. All right. So here's the United States Census. This is just data. And you notice that the census is basically 4 million people of every age, and then people start to die about age 60. So let's have a pretend county. This is an imaginary county. And after you take the kids out, you have exactly 1,000 people. So this is a pretend county by age. How many people of every age in a pretend county? Certain percentage of them will be registered to vote. Notice I've chose 87% in my example. And then here, a certain percentage of those would vote. That would be 70%. So now notice, if I know the blue curve, and I know the percentages between the black curve or the red curve, I can predict any of those curves. I only need to know the percentages between them. That's the basic idea that allows me to go in your state. I'll show you one example. So for example, here's Hamilton County, Ohio, or Cincinnati, where I'm from, and here's who's registered to vote. You notice that the blue curve is the population, the black curve is who's registered to vote. Just about everybody's registered. Guess what? You guys have that same problem. But, and Judicial Watch already mentioned that. It's interesting because in 2010, a guy named Kurt Hyde published this article. Will the 2010 U.S. Census data be used to fraudulently register voters? He told him how to do this 10 years ago, and it's exactly what I found. He predicted 10 years ago, I found happened in 2020. But anyway, the point is that they're filling up your rolls using the census, and then they're controlling who votes using a simple algorithm. And that simple algorithm is, we call it the key. And I'm showing you a key here. For example, this is the key for Ohio. You notice it's a nice, smooth function. As a physicist, when I take data and I analyze data and I see a smooth function, I go, uh-oh, something's going on here. This isn't just something random. And in fact, it's called a sixth-order polynomial. It's built right into Excel. It's a very simple kind of equation. You learn it in algebra. But it's built right into Excel, and I found a sixth-order polynomial controlling the voting in every state I've studied so far, and I've studied 40 states. So, like I mentioned, if you know one of the curves and you know the sixth-order polynomial, you can predict all the others. So here's Ohio. Look at Ohio. Here's Kansas. Ohio, Kansas. See how it's a different shape? So one of the things that's important to realize is every state has its own key. Once I know the key, and all I have to do is study one county, I can predict all the other counties in your state. That doesn't prove fraud, but it's awfully strange that I can predict everything that's happening in your elections. So it suggests the operation of an algorithm. So just very quickly, here's Allen County begins with A, so it's the first one. So what I've done for every one of your counties, and I'll put this video online so you guys can look at every single one of your counties. You notice the top curve here is the blue curve. That's the population in every one of your counties. That's from the 2019 census. The black curve is from your own registration rolls, showing you who's registered. And you notice here in the very first example, that black curve is pretty close to that blue curve. Just about everybody's registered to vote. That's a really high rate. In fact, it's 94.5%. That's not reasonable. When you go out and knock on doors, you will not find 95% of your people registered. Then the light blue curve is me predicting who votes, and the red curve is the number of ballots that are actually recorded. Now, and then over here on the right, this is called a correlation coefficient. The closer that number is to 1, the more perfect of a prediction it is. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you all of your counties real quickly. Oops, I'm supposed to do that. It's supposed to play. Play. It didn't play. Okay, I don't know why it's not playing. All right. F5. Well, I'll tell you what. All right. I just don't want you to think I cherry-picked. It's the first one. They're all going to play one after another. Shift F5, and it's pretty dramatic to see them all playing at the same time. Here's the summary. I only have 25 minutes, so I'm about to get done. It's a summary of me predicting every county, and the average R value, the average correlation coefficient, is 0.97. That ain't natural. For me to be able to predict all your counties that accurately, and I put this table in that handout you already have. The thing about it is you also have an interesting system in your state. You use centralized poll books. Any state that has centralized poll books, especially when it's top down from the state, I've noticed not only can I predict the county level, I can predict the precinct level. And here's just one example of me predicting a precinct in Wyandotte County. You notice the red curve is who voted, and the black curve is me predicting who voted. It's ridiculous. I shouldn't be able to predict it that accurately. Now, there's a report that came out in a Georgia case. It's called the Halderman Report, and it's making big news right now. You're going to be seeing it. It was sealed by a judge. A gentleman, Halderman, he's a professor, statistics professor. I think he was actually hired by the Democrats after 2016 because the Democrats were saying that the election was stolen by the Russians, remember? He was hired by them, and he investigated all of the systems around the country, and he found 16 states in particular that were particularly vulnerable to the kind of hacking that would produce my ability to predict counties. And guess what? You're on the list. You're one of the 16. You're one of the ones that are extremely vulnerable. It comes in through your automatic voting systems where it prints the ballot for you and marks the ballot for you. That's an extremely vulnerable part of your system, and that's not coming from me, that's coming from this report. It's sad to me that the judge sealed it. This is the summary report. All the detailed work is sealed right now, but because it exposes how to do it. It exposes how to hack the machines. But he knows, a lot of people know. So you have that system, so watch out. You're vulnerable. A lot of people, you always hear the argument, well, it's the machines, the machines, the machines, but what the real hack is the registration rolls. And that's why I'm showing you the fact that the registrations are growing faster than your population gives the bad guys a credit line of people. I like what Mike Lindell says. He says they're using their names. They're using people who are on the roll to vote and put in phony ballots. There's also something new. You're about to hear this. So this is not totally public knowledge yet, but ES&S sent out a note to 19 states, Secretary of States, and yes, you're on that list, announcing before the election that your poll books were totally, quote unquote, a hacker's paradise. And they were unable to fix it before the election. They admitted in the emails. We're about to release those to the public. They're sort of already out there, just not, people haven't really realized what they are yet. These are actual emails between ES&S and Dominion and your secretaries of states, 19 states, and you're on the list. It's a hacker's paradise. So you're going to be hearing about that too. So as you're going forward with your legislation, you have to realize the real vulnerability isn't necessarily the tabulators and not necessarily the scanners. Your real vulnerability is your poll books and your registration rules. All right, this is not going away. 60% of the public now believes that the 2020 general election outcome was fraudulent, and your state is coming alive. I've seen it in a lot of states. Your citizens, they are waking up. This is happening. Lots of plans for canvassing are happening. We're going to be working with several small counties especially to try to switch to paper elections. I think that's it. Vote Amish is what I like to tell people. It's not just me saying it. Kamala Harris back in 2019, the Democrats were all saying, when they thought that the Russians hacked our election, the Democrats were always saying, oh, our machines are vulnerable, right? So it's not a party. It's not a Republican versus Democrat thing. Both parties, we know we're hacked. All right, so I would say vote Amish.
We got some questions.
Yeah. I know I went fast, but I had only 25 minutes. I thought I was going to have 35.
Any questions? Senator Straub.
Hi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Dr. Frank, for being here today. Okay, lots of information
I
here.
dumped a lot on you, I know.
But, so I can absolutely understand how electronic poll books could be
Yep.
easily manipulated. Now, how do these hackers request the actual ballots? Where are they being sent to? And how are they being returned to our county clerk's offices in Kansas?
That's an excellent question. I just testified before the Wisconsin State Legislature, and we exposed an analogous situation. So let me use that kind of as an answer. The problem is we think like honest people. We think if we have a system with honest people running it, that it will behave like we expect it to run. But we're honest. We have to quit thinking that way. We have to think like the bad guys. If I can hack into your rolls, I can change anything I want in your rolls. So for example, I could order an absentee ballot for you, and then I could put in the rolls that it was already mailed. And then I could print one out at home, and then fill it out and put it in the mail back to you, and you would expect it because you mailed one according to your records. See how that works? There's a chain of custody issue there. The problem, or I could drop it in a Dropbox, and there's no ID required, and the whole process could have taken place without you even knowing. In Milwaukee County in Wisconsin, they have 120,000 ballots they received that were never ordered. There was a glitch in the system that was supposed to be recording that they'd already been sent. And that's how we uncovered it. That's just one example. Did I answer that question? That's just one way to get it in there.
Yeah, somewhat. My background's in local government and county government.
Yes.
I've served on the Board of County Canvassers.
Yeah.
And like I said, I can understand how electronic poll books and everything can be manipulated.
Yes.
But in Barton County, we have an electronic paper system. So it prints out a paper ballot, even if you vote electronically, and then it's tabulated on paper. And those paper ballots are kept, I believe, for 2 years or close to 2
Yeah.
years at least. And I think possibly that our county clerk keeps them even longer. So I'm just curious to
Yeah.
be able to take the information that we have
Yes.
and go back through, I mean, even if it's ward by ward in a city, and verifying that it says that this person voted. We can go to that address and see if that person still resides there. We could see if that person,
Yes, you're describing
reside
canvassing.
there.
That's exactly right.
you know, if, I'm just saying, so what has happened with trying to verify that information in the,
Well, watch out, because
verify
these
it.
people are going to be doing that exact job. They're going to be knocking on the doors, finding those discrepancies. Let me answer something about that. All the votes that are in person are probably okay. You know, somebody comes in, they show you that ID, you print the ballot for them, that's all handles. It's the mail-in ballots that's the problem, because you don't have that same chain of custody. And I was just with the clerk last week, not in this state, in Nebraska, and the clerk was saying, "Oh, nobody gets a ballot unless we send one to them." And they're, you know, it's a small county, 1,500 people, and I agree, those local people, they're sticklers about it, and they're really picky. But we showed her that 10 ballots were in her system that she never sent out, and somebody on the outside is printing the ballots and turning them in. But in her records, it shows that a ballot was never ordered even, and in some of those cases. So you kind of have to do this reconciliation. And I don't want, and I encourage our citizens and your citizens not to think of your local people as the enemy. They've been hacked, and you help them learn that and show them, and then they're mad too. Nobody likes being hacked.
I think we got another question. Is your answer?
Did I do okay? I'm trying to answer
We're
it.
just tight on time.
Yeah.
Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Doctor, when was that email sent to all secretaries of state? Or the 19th?
October, before the election. Before the 2020 election, yeah.
October before the November election?
Yeah, in 2020.
And you're going to show us those?
I'm going to give all that to you guys, yes.
Is there any correspondence back and forth from?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And there are several secretaries of state saying, this is a disaster. We can't go forward with our election. And one of them even said, okay, I'll certify it, but it's the last one I'm certifying until we fix this problem. And I mean, it's like they knew. It's a bad situation. And you were on that. Your Secretary of State was on that list. So they were aware that this was a hacker's paradise. Bad news. I'll make sure you get those links. It's just all coming out right now. There's so much happening. Have you noticed, like, just I think Monday, Wisconsin voted to decertify their election. Their House did. I mean, this is all happening all across the country. This is pretty serious stuff. Yeah.
Just make sure you get it to Michael and he'll get it to everybody.
Yeah, very good. I'm sorry that my presentation didn't light up the slides. I made a lot of changes.
No, that's all right.
Yeah.
We're just in a tight time frame. I
No worries.
like to have 5 or 6 hours and
Yeah.
we only got an hour and a half.
Yeah, I do tend to talk on.
Do we have any other quick questions?
Happy to be with you guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Greg. Let's go ahead and move on to Dakota Davis.
Thank you so much. Right. Can everybody hear me okay? So my name is Dakota Davis, and I'm going to be speaking to you about the Kansas voter registration data, or voter rolls, as they're frequently called. You should have a written report in front of you that looks like this, has some blue shading on the front. My full report is in here, and I'll be kind of covering and summarizing that information as a part of this speech. But this,
we got's black because
oh, that's
black
true.
and white, so.
No worries. It's titled Exploratory Data Analysis of Kansas Voter Registration Data.
Kind of show the front page again.
Sure.
'Cause,
It's like this.
okay. You can go ahead and start. And
Sure.
We'll work to find it.
Sounds good. And like I said, I'll be summarizing that, but in that written report, there's more details of what I'm referencing. So as I said, my name is Dakota Davis. My plan is to give you a very brief background about myself. I'll walk you through the analysis I did on the Kansas voter registration data. I'll summarize the main conclusions I drew from my analysis, and then I'll speak to some of the results that are in the report. So my quick bio is that I've lived in Kansas for the majority of my life, and I currently live here. I have a master's degree in biostatistics from the University of Kansas Medical Center, a PhD in epidemiology from Capella University, and I am currently a manager of data science at a large corporation that's one of the 30 companies on the Dow Jones Industrial Average. So I'm used to working with pretty large data sets, and so the report that you all have in your packet is an exploratory data analysis I did on the statewide Kansas voter registration data that was pulled in early 2021 following the general election of 2020. As any good data scientist or statistician knows, before you can do all the fun techie and mathy stuff like Dr. Frank just walked through, you have to do what is called EDA, or exploratory data analysis. And what EDA is, it's a process by which you look at the data before you start using it. You look to understand the data and see if the fields accurately represent what they're supposed to. During EDA, you might look to see if there's missing data you need to account for, if there's a number in a field that's supposed to be a character, or if a field that is supposed to have dates in it actually has valid dates represented. When I performed this type of analysis on the statewide Kansas voter registration data, I found some concerning anomalies and results. The main conclusion of my analysis is that our voter registration data is not being accurately maintained. Even the most basic data entry checks are clearly not being performed on the voter registration data, and in a state where even a dozen votes can be outcome determinant in many of our local elections, this is quite concerning. We have a saying in the data science community, garbage in, garbage out. What that means is that the outcome from a process, an analysis, or a predictive model is only as good as what you put into it. So if you put garbage into a process, then what you get out of it will most likely be garbage, or at least it'll smell a little funny. So my question to you and to all of those here in this room is, why do we expect the outcomes from our electoral process to have integrity, transparency, and accuracy if the things feeding into that process are clearly not? The voter registration data is a perfect example of where the process needs some attention and reform, and I'm going to walk through some examples to back up my conclusions. So let me go ahead and get into the details. On page 2 of that report, there is a summary of birthdays of registered voters. If you went to Google today and searched for the least common days on which to be born, what you would find across many different studies and time periods and popular opinion is that New Year's Day, Leap Day, the 4th of July, Christmas Eve, and Christmas are always the rarest days on which to be born. When I graphed the number of registered voters born on a particular day throughout the year, I found the results to be consistent with all of these studies across all birthdays except for one, and that is January 1st. Instead of January 1st being one of the rarest days on which to be born, I found that January 1st was the most common day on which to be born among all Kansas registered voters. In fact, when I sliced up the data further, I found January 1st was the #1 birthday on which to be born among first-time voters in the general election of 2020 and among voters who have no voting history at all. So these are voters who are registered to vote, but there is no actual recording of them actually voting in any election. So where are those 45,000 excess votes? Maybe that's a place to look. Given that it's nearly impossible for January 1st to truly be the most common day on which to be born, I have to conclude it must be a default for inaccurate or potentially fraudulent voter registrations. So that's one analysis. If we keep going in that report, I found that there are voter registrations of people with ages beyond what is reasonably possible. So I did my research, and I found that the oldest known person in Kansas today is 108 years old. However, we have people voting in elections and who have active voter registrations with ages well over 108 years old. In fact, we even had 7 people vote in the general election of 2020 who had a documented age of 219 years old. This is just one example of the many clearly impossible date of births listed in the voter registration data. I found similar anomalies when it came to the year of voter registration, so that's on another page in the report. There were data entry errors where a proper date wasn't actually entered at all, so it wasn't a valid date. There are also registered voters who are voting in our elections who have impossible dates of registration. For example, there are 260 voter registrations where the voter supposedly registered to vote in 1901. 219 of these 260 voters actually voted in the general election of 2020, and all but 7 of them remain active in the voter rolls. Again, this is just one example of the many different clearly impossible registration years listed in our Kansas voter registration data. There are many examples of missing or incomplete voter identification, so that's on the next page of the report. For example, 3,677 voter registrations have only a single initial listed as their first name. 665 voter registrations have nothing more than a single initial as their first and middle name. There are situations where parts or all of the name is completely missing. There are around 4,000 voter registrations with a missing residential street number or street name, or they only listed a P.O. box as their residential street. There are at least 100 examples of voter registrations where there's no identifiable address information provided at all, not even a mailing address. I've provided a couple real examples on that page in the report showing how information is just clearly not being verified. For example, there's a voter registration where the name is actually entered as, quote, participant number, and identifiable address information is not included at all. There's another example that I provided in the report where an individual listed their middle and their last name as a single initial, and then proceeded to list an empty lot with no mailbox or buildings as their residential address. And these are just a couple examples that I've pulled out. Finally, I found many situations where there appears to be multiple voter registrations per individual voter. This is on the last page of that report. To say this another way, these are situations where an individual voter has more than one voter ID in the voter registration database. A popular example of this is if someone moved to a new address, then a new voter registration was created, but the old voter registration never got removed and remains active. While I cannot say with 100% certainty that every situation is the same person, at least 1,200 voters representing around 2,500 voter registrations shared the exact same name, the exact same date of birth, and either shared the exact same phone number or residential address. It is thus very, very likely that many of these voters are the same person, but are showing up more than once in the voter registration data. So this work is a work in progress with new learnings and findings every day. I've had the data for a little less than a month now. And what I walk through today is just a snapshot of what I'm seeing as I continue to dive into the voter registration data. I cannot prove that this is fraud. We definitely need reform and canvassing in order to verify that information. But I hope that you can agree that work is definitely needed to improve and enhance the quality of our voter registration data. Like I said at the beginning, if what we're feeding our elections is garbage, then why do we expect it to smell like a clean house? So I definitely want to thank you all for your time. This is very gracious of you to allow us to come in and present. And so I will take any questions at this time.
We have some questions. Senator Fascado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hi, around the corner. I need to grow a little bit.
No worries.
So how are you able to obtain the individual's voter registration cards to see, you know, like we do know that people have a P.O. box who are homeless, and we still want them to be able to, you know, because I represent a lot of disabled veterans.
Yes.
And so how did you get that information, and what is your objection to the P.O. box for a person who is homeless, but, you know, they fought for our country and they still want to vote?
Absolutely, that's a great question. So our county clerks in every county send their results into the Secretary of State's office, and so they kind of maintain that, or have, I should say, a copy of that statewide voter registration data. This data was purchased from there, and that is the data on which I've done this analysis. I would say to your second question is you are absolutely correct. There are legitimate situations where maybe there's not like an actual street name. There's actually some fields in the data that's called a physical address. So if somebody's extremely rural, sometimes you have a mailbox in one place, but where you live is in another. And so there's documentation of that, or there may be certain PO boxes. However, in Kansas, we have voter identification. And it strikes me as interesting that we're seeing so many examples where information is incomplete or not easily verified. And so I think this really, does not prove fraud by any means, because there are legitimate cases, but the magnitude of the things that we're seeing makes it clearly impossible that all of these are legitimate cases. And so that's a great question.
Do we have any other quick questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Dakota. Thad Snyder?
Thank you. Senator Olson, committee, thanks for having me today. My name's Thad Snyder. I'm a resident of Johnson County. I want to take a moment to thank all the other Kansans who couldn't present today. I did not come to all these conclusions myself. This has been a joint effort by hundreds, if not thousands, of my fellow Kansans who are looking into this for the same reasons that I am. And I also want to thank Dr. Frank for coming here today. I'm hoping someday he gets recognized as an American hero, because he really is doing a lot of work for election integrity, and he deserves a lot of credit for all this. I noticed what everyone else did about 2020, the votes coming from under the table, the votes stopping, the weird numbers coming in the middle of the night, and it piqued my interest. And I thought, well, at least I live in Kansas where that doesn't happen. At least I thought. So I don't want to get too into the weeds on 2020, but since everyone's already kind of covered it. But the first thing I noticed is that we had about 99% of our county was registered to vote, with about 77% voter turnout. That goes against the national averages of 70 and 61 by quite a bit. And so that was kind of like, that doesn't make any sense. And then the other thing I noticed was the breakdown of the registered voters, almost 195,000 Republicans, 138,000 Democrats, 114 independents, but somehow the Democratic candidate had an 11% gain in Johnson County, and it went blue for the first time since 1916. That didn't fit with the rest of the state. So if you kind of look at the rest of the state, it kind of stayed copacetic to what the 2016 vote looked like outside of Johnson County, but Johnson County was anomalous in that the Democratic candidate gained 57,000 votes out of the total of 67,000 new votes that were cast. So 85% of the new votes went to the Democratic candidate in a county that was dominated by Republicans, where there were only 138,000 Democrats. So that's how I got here. That's how I started on this. Then I started looking at 2021. I've been met with fierce obfuscation on my Cora requests for information about the election. I've been told they're sealed up. I can't see it without a court order. That's absurd. Every part of the voting process should be public. It should be inspectable and auditable by the public. But that's not the case. We have 8 drop boxes in Johnson County. And I filed a Kansas Open Records Act request on November 3rd and November 7th asking for the ballot transfer documents for those drop boxes. In the previous election, I was told they were sealed up. I couldn't have them. So this time I said, I want them before you seal it up. I want those documents. Before it's certified, I want those documents. Of course, I got a response that said you'll get them December 2nd, which was after the certification. So you can't contest if you don't have the information. There was no reason they couldn't have given them to me. They just waited until after the contestation period to do so, and I'll tell you why. Out of the 113 ballot transfer documents I received in the 2021 election in Johnson County, none had the 4 signatures required. None. Not one of them. That was about 7,000 votes retrieved from the ballot drop boxes that do not have a proper chain of custody. That's enough to be determinative in the outcome of every election. You can see here, here's an example of one of the ballot transfer forms that I was told by Johnson County Legal Counsel was, quote, substantially complete. What do you notice? Nothing's checked. We're missing 3 signatures. How is that a legal document? 113 ballot transfer forms look very similar to this and are bereft of the 4 signatures that State Elections Director Brian Caskey told me needed to be on that form. 1 Republican, 1 Democrat on the receiving and the retrieving side of that document. That's not there. The other thing is that I've read the Kansas statute on elections backwards and forwards, and I don't see anywhere where the drop boxes were approved by the legislature. Not once. You guys have plenary power over elections. Article 3 of the Constitution gives you that power. The executive branch of the government cannot change the way in which we collect ballots, tabulate ballots. Everything they do should be within the statute of what you told them they could do. This was a directive from CISA, the Cyber Infrastructure Security Agency at the federal level, basically sent out this letter and said, we're going to give you some drop boxes, and here's how you should use them. You can see on the chain of custody, it says, the custody logs must be completed every time ballots are collected. Team members should sign the log, record the date and time, security seal number at opening, and security seal number when the box is locked and sealed again. This didn't happen. So either the drop boxes are legal and the chain of custody wasn't followed, or the drop boxes are illegal and they never should have been used in the first place. So here's where I'm at. On Tuesday, December 9th, the Johnson County canvassers met to certify the election. According to one of the canvassers that I spoke with, they spent 15 minutes certifying the election. When the canvassers show up, they're presented with all the election-related materials, and it says they shall inspect. You all know from a legislative sense, shall means you have to do it. They didn't. I was told that. They didn't thumb through anything. They didn't look at anything. Nothing happened. I confirmed with the Johnson County Election Director, Fred Sherman, in a meeting where he told me that he gave them all the information, the provisional ballots, the ballot transfer forms, and nobody picked them up and nobody looked at them, but they signed off on the election anyway. So one of 2 things happened. They either did look at those ballot transfer forms and considered them substantially complete like Johnson County did, or they didn't look at them, in which case they certified a fraudulent election while illegally not inspecting the forms. I made the canvassers, I made the Secretary of State, I made the Attorney General, I made everybody with statutory authority aware of this in an email on December 6th. I heard from a couple of people. I didn't hear back. So I followed up on December 16th. I heard back from Clay Barker, who's the Secretary of State's legal counsel, who said I would get a response. I'll have that in here in just a second. But my point is that I made them aware of this lack of chain of custody. I made them aware that they didn't inspect it, and they still certified the election. And all those people who got voted on in 2021 are now in office, despite the fact we don't have chain of custody for 7,000 votes. And we just found out on Friday that there's a 191 ballot difference between the total number of mail-in ballots, that's the absentee ballots and drop boxes, and the official total. So there's 191 ballots that don't even have a chain of custody in either instance. I just found that out. I don't have all the details, but I'll share it once we end up parsing through the data. There is no transparency on our side. So we're left to our own devices to try to figure out, is this legit? Everybody in this room has doubts about what happened in 2020 to some degree. And so I filed core requests for these things. And one of the things I filed a core request for was the ballot Dropbox security footage. I don't know if you guys know what's going on out in Georgia with True the Vote, but they basically figured out there were 242 ballot harvesters who made over 5,000 trips to the ballot drop boxes and were dumping ballots into the drop boxes in the middle of the night. I wanted to see if that was going on here. You can see in the response I got from Johnson County's legal counsel that it would somehow compromise water, power, and cybersecurity secrets of the county if I got those videos of an unmanned drop box outside of a library. My response was, aren't you in violation of your own statute then? You put the drop boxes there. It's a public library. I can see walking up to the box everything I can see in the video, but they won't give them to me. Why not? Because it'll compromise cybersecurity secrets somehow in the county if I look at a drop box outside a library. So I've brought this to the attention of every statutory authority in Kansas, the AG's office, the Secretary of State, Johnson County's Chief Legal Counsel, and the Johnson County District Attorney Steve Howe. I've also contacted State Elections Director Brian Caskey. I've talked to Mr. Barker over here about it, various members of the House and Senate, the Johnson County Sheriff. As you can see, all of those people have the four at the top have statutory authority over election crimes. But if you ask them that, they're going to tell you that they don't. So the day I sent my first email, the Secretary of State's office that afternoon rolled out their election security initiative where you could report voter fraud. Timing's kind of funny, hadn't heard anything. 10 days later, followed up, said, do I need to report my crimes through your portal, or is my previous email going to suffice? And that's when I heard from Mr. Barker. Here's Mr. Barker's response. Brian Caskey told me that the Secretary of State's role in our elections is administrative. That's not true. The statute dictates that he does have enforcement capabilities. I'll get into it here in a minute, but I do understand there was an agreement between him and the Attorney General on the enforcement of that. But my point is, I shouldn't have to try this hard to get a crime investigated, right? And this is what it's taken me to get here to this today. You can see here there's a memorandum of agreement that was signed that Mr. Barker provided in September of 2020 between the Secretary of State's office and the Attorney General, where basically the Secretary of State said, you prosecute election crimes, I'll let you know when they happen. Well, I don't know how that works, but I don't know how you can just abrogate your constitutional duty to uphold your oath to the Constitution to somebody else, but that's what happened. But when I called the Attorney General's office about it, they told me they don't have the authority to prosecute election crimes. That's what the Assistant AG told me. And I'm like, how's that possible? You're the top law enforcement agency in Kansas. How do you not have that ability? Recently, the Secretary of State's office was bragging about their election integrity scorecard with the Heritage Foundation. You can see the announcement, top 10. According to the Heritage Foundation, we were actually 13. They rated us 69 out of 100. A D plus is nothing to brag about. That would have gotten you grounded if you were a child, if you came home and tried to brag about that on your math tests. But yet, our Secretary of State thought it was necessary to brag about that. Going into that a little bit further, there were 3 areas that stood out in the Heritage Foundation's report that I wanted to talk about. The first of which was the accuracy of registration lists, which I don't want to beat that dead horse into glue, but that definitely needs to get addressed. The dirty voter rolls are a big part of the problems that we're facing. The other one was absentee ballot management and the election litigation procedures, in this case, enforcement. You can see here kind of some of the things they point out as far as like what we don't do that we should probably start thinking about, including notarizing the signature on an absentee ballot. There's no reason not to do that. It should absolutely be done to verify that person's identity if it's necessary for them to vote by mail. You can see down here some of the statistics that the Heritage Foundation pointed out was that 70% or more think that mail-in voting will lead to cheating. So that's a vast majority of the country believes that mail-in voting could lead to cheating, and 76% think requiring a photo ID is okay. So if we need a photo ID for absentee ballots, they need to be notarized. I think that's a good first step. And then the last one, they give us a 0 out of 1 because we do use unattended, unsecured drop boxes to collect votes. The last one was the litigation procedures. Now, I was told, after I figured all this out, after I went to the Secretary of State's office, after I went to the county, after I went there, I went back to the AG and I explained what was going on. And they told me, quote, you're going to have to sue. Why should I have to sue to make sure our votes are counted correctly? That's absurd. And as you've seen, we keep getting thrown out on standing anyway. That's always the thing. Like, you don't have standing, you don't have standing, you don't have standing. There needs to be legislation passed that gives us the ability to contest the election easier than what we are, or at least be able to see the information that was used to administer that election without having to go through a legal battle. Already talked about the Attorney General, talked about, you'll need to sue. These are the crimes that I think happened. First of all, I think there's civil rights violations. I think there's First and 14th Amendment rights that have been violated in the administration of the election and in my pursuit of these truths. These denials on my CORA requests are insane. I've filed CORA complaints. I filed my first CORA complaint June 15th of last year. I have yet to get a resolution on that. There's no statute that dictates how long that the district attorney can have those complaints or that he has to even do anything with them. There's no resolution to it. Here we are in February. Those are the crimes. There's a remedy. I don't think that 2021 should have been certified. I think it immediately needs to be looked at. And here's my grander point with regard to enforcement. These are all the people that I've made aware of this. And now I've made you aware of it. Now what? None of them want to do anything about it. So where are we at? We know the election did not have a proper chain of custody for 7,000 ballots. I have those. They gave them to me, actually. And this has been kind of the general consensus among everybody in Kansas when it comes to elections. I don't know who's telling people to ignore this. I don't know who's telling people not to do anything about it. But there are crimes being committed. And it matters. So the poll on the right was from Rasmussen, and that's just Democrat voters. 41% now say cheating was likely in the 2020 election. 41% of Democrats. I don't know what that number is for Republicans, but I'm going to guess it's probably about double. 85. Thank you, Dr. Frank, with the assist. 58% of overall voters believe that there was fraud in the 2020 election. Your problem is not that there was fraud necessarily, it's that everybody thinks there was fraud. You have to assuage those concerns. There has to be transparency, there has to be enforcement, there have to be changes, or this is going to keep happening. Over on the right, this was a recent poll done by Rasmussen. This is about independent voters, kind of a breakdown of everything that people think might have happened in 2020 and how they feel about it. The bottom one is what I think is most important, and that's that 90% think it's important to prevent cheating in elections. Well, duh, right? Like that's like a duh thing, but yet nothing's happening about it, right? The entire electorate basically thinks we need fair elections and it's not happening. And that's a problem. The other problem that I found is when I Cora the contracts between Johnson County and ES&S, it's the most one-sided contract you've ever seen in your life. I sent it to a friend of mine who does mergers and acquisitions. He's an attorney. I said, what do you think about this? He's like, why would anybody sign that? We basically sign away our rights as a county to look at the machines, see the source code. We can't work on them. We can't look at them. Nothing. We sign all that away, and we don't even own them. We lease them. We lease them for like $1 million a year. We paid $10 million for them initially. We pay $100 and some thousand a year for service just in Johnson County. That's absurd. So what do we do about it?
We're getting down to the last 20 minutes.
I got 2 slides.
Okay, I just want to make sure everybody gets
Sure, I'll be real quick.
the questions.
So what do we do about 2020 and 2021? My suggestion is you appoint a special counsel like they're doing in Wisconsin. Justice Gableman's been doing yeoman's work up there and uncovering their fraud. I think that would be a good first step. We've obviously seen that the executive branch of our government's not going to do anything, so I'm going to be relying upon the legislature to do something. I think all of the 2020 and 2021 election materials should be kept, not destroyed, until this can all be found out. We've all been working on this nonstop, and this is as far as we've gotten. If we get to September and they destroy everything, it's all for naught. So those records need to be kept. There needs to be an injunction filed to make sure that doesn't happen. I think that if the results of the special counsel investigation show that there was fraud, that's when we order the audit, the full audit. But let's get somebody in there to bang around and find out a few things. And then here's what we do about the 2022 election. I won't go too much into this. You guys can read through that, but those are some of my suggestions. But I echo what Dr. Frank said. We need to vote on paper, and we need to be able to watch that process, and we need to be able to audit it as a public along with the election representatives. I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Senator Fasquedo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had to take out my gum. Sir, when you talk about the election, are you talking about your local elections
Yes,
in
ma'am.
Johnson County or the presidential elections that didn't get recounted?
Well, both, really. I mean, both are important.
You talking about recounts, the outcome of a questionable election?
Yeah, we should be able to look at that as a public. There's no reason to hide that from the Kansas people, which is currently hidden behind I don't know how many layers of, for lack of a better word, BS.
One of the things, too, there's several bills, like I said earlier, that are introduced on mail-in ballots, different things. There's probably about, I don't know, 10 or a dozen or so. There's a lot.
Okay.
And we're going to look, that's coming up. Like I said, we got to see what happens this week with the weather, but I'm guessing we're about a week out and we're going to probably dive into that pretty deep, a lot of these issues. So if you guys want to participate in them,
I do.
you will.
Absolutely.
Okay. Senator Straub?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Thad, for being here. I found it particularly interesting that they would not give you the security footage of those ballot boxes. Was that answer coming from the elections office in Johnson County, or who refused to give it to you?
The Johnson County Legal Department was who responded. Cynthia Dunham is one of the attorneys for the county, and she is pretty much who has been replying to my core requests since I started this. Fred Sherman's our elections director, but that one was, if you read through that statute, it doesn't make any sense. And considering what they've been able to prove out in Georgia with the ballot harvesting, again, it's that preponderance of doubt that everyone in this room really needs to get rid of, and especially at the local level. And I don't know why they won't give it to me. It doesn't make any sense. I'm having to sue them. I have a lawsuit going to look at footage that should be publicly available anyway.
There might be another way to look at that footage.
I would like to see it. Well, and here's the other deal, is that Fred Sherman, the elections director of Johnson County, told me they don't even look at it. They don't watch the tapes. They don't review it. Nobody looks at it. So why do we have it? I can't see it. You don't look at it. Why do we have it?
Go ahead, one quick follow-up, and then, because we got two more people, and I want to give them a little time.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Just a follow-up comment. So Johnson County has a separate board of canvassers, correct?
No, the Board of County Commissioners is the canvassers. And there's another thing that I think you guys need to address, is that the day of the canvass, Becky Fass, one of our commissioners, didn't show up, so she sent a surrogate, which it says in statute you can do that. My problem with that is that surrogate could be anybody, and they don't have to know what they're doing. He just showed up, certified it, and then left. But he didn't have any training or anything on like what he was supposed to be doing. I don't know if they do either. Maybe that's why they don't look at the records.
And that's the question. If your county commissioners are your board of canvassers, and did they certified those ballots that did not have signatures?
Yes. No. The chain of custody documents did not have signatures.
Okay, but they
certified that election, even though they knew that.
Knowing who transferred the ballots, that's what you're saying?
I don't know if they knew it when they certified it, but I've certainly made them aware since.
Okay, thank you.
And then they went ahead and allowed those people to take office and didn't recant their certification.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have a quick one? If there's time at the end, I'll let you, go ahead. Thad, there's one more question.
Oh, actually, I was just going to ask, like, if Mr. Sherman and/or the Secretary of State's office will be coming in to talk to us about some of the issues that have been brought forward.
They have opportunity. No one's asked me to come over, but I'd be more than happy to have them. We'll go ahead and move on to Rob. I'll let you pronounce your last name.
All right, it's Strathman. So thank you so much for letting us speak today. Obviously, you can hear all the passion. I mean, this is a small group, but there's thousands beyond us behind this room and this wall today that's really adamant that there's a problem. And I think we've seen a lot of smoke today, and where there's smoke, there's fire. The material that I wanted to share with you today, actually a little bit about myself before I get started. I'm a lifelong Kansas resident. I have a degree from Kansas State University. I worked 9 years right across the street from here with Hill's Pet Nutrition. My responsibility during that time was building what I refer to as the very first digital manufacturing pet food facilities in the pet food industry. Currently, I'm a president of a small R&D firm located in Johnson County. That company, or what we're focusing on today, is the use of AI and data and the industrial Internet of Things to make factories and feed processing equipment more efficient. So I know a little bit about what it means to use data, to use automation systems, and how to make that a bit reliant or reliable.
We got the total of 15 minutes, so just.
I've got 5 minutes, so I'm going to just cut to the chase. What I'm wanting to share with you today was just the material. Basically communications back and forth between the Secretary of State, the Director of Elections, Brian Caskey, and the Johnson County Election Commissioner. I don't know if I need to say all these names, but on top of that, then ES&S and then there's a few other people. So these are the string of emails that went back and forth. These are all dated somewhere between January 1st, 2020 and November 30th, 2020. So just simply wanting to review this material to see if there's anything that stood out. And there were some things that I really wanted to share with you today that describe the 2020 election. 2 words, actually maybe 3, susceptible, uncontrolled, and unequal are the 3 words that I think describe that election. I don't have time to go through all this material. I went through roughly 700 emails. In the outline that I gave you in your packet, I tried to catalog the key emails that I found that I thought were interesting. I boiled all of those down into 4 summary slides or 4 key finding slides. But I just want to hit the top lines here. First of all, because of the pandemic, right, March 2020, we had to enable the election systems officials to work from home, right? So we had to have access now to ELVIS. ELVIS is our voter registration and election management system. They had to enable these people to work from home, right, via the internet. That opened up hundreds of new portals, new access points to enter into ELVIS. May not be a big issue, but that's the first point that I highlight here. Secondly, then in May, there was an update to that ELVIS software. They went to version 14.5. And in doing so, shortly thereafter, weeks go by, they start to notice that there's a lot of activity from these new users that are not being identified, right? They know there's people in there making changes, but the system is supposed to track anybody that's inside of there making changes. They address this with ES&S. ES&S says, yes, we realize we have a defect. There's no more emails, there's no other communications. I have no idea if it ever got fixed, but that's a bit of a problem if anybody can get inside of our systems and make a change. The third major point here is that in September, 6 weeks prior to the general election, our Secretary of State and the Director of Elections had no idea. They failed to do what I believe is just their due diligence. They sent out an email asking, I'm a little dry here, but they sent out an email asking if our election systems have internal wireless modems. They asked both their own staff and they asked ES&S. Well, of course, their own staff is not able to answer that question because they don't know this system. ES&S is the ones that are answering the question, right? This is a basic security question, and our own staff has not done the due diligence to find out if that even exists. So, of course, ES&S, so-called trusted partner, has to respond. So on page 44, actually 43, 44, I don't know if I have time to go through all this, but this is some of the key stuff. Who is ES&S? What do we know about them? So if you go to slide 42, oops. On slide 42, there's a letter from an article written by Politico. And
Shift F5.
Shift F5, okay. Thank you. So in this article, you're going to see that Politico is highlighting the fact that ES&S is less than honorable. They question their deceptive marketing tactics. And they go on, and of course, I've got all this automated, and the handouts that you have don't get all this pretty animation. You don't get to see what I'm trying to hit home. But was this the first time? So they're saying that they admit that they have a problem. ES&S admits that they've been less than honest about their material. And what they were lying about, or what they were deceiving their customers about, was the use of these wireless routers, or these wireless modems. Yep. There were... They were claiming in their literature that they were EAC approved, and when they were actually not, and they got called out by the Politico article here, the author. And this was written in August of 2020. So about 2 months before the election. I'm assuming this is what prompted the Secretary of State to ask, do we have these modems? But here we are trusting ES&S. If you go on down in through here, is this the first time that ES&S has lied to the public? No, it's not. We find that they had admitted in front of a hearing probably similar to this by a Senator Wyden, a Democrat of Oregon. He asked if there was modems, these wireless modems on his system. They had to admit in public that yes, they do have them. So going further, at the very end of the article, it says, what's next? ES&S admitted that they have 33,000 of these DS200 tabulators across 11 states that have wireless modems. Our question is do we have one of those or many of these 33,000 DS200s? We know we have a lot of them in this state, but when we ask if they were, we're relying on, the emails here show that Secretary of State is relying on our less than reputable partner to answer that question. So still to this day, I have significant doubts about whether we have wireless modems installed or not. Actually, to go on further, the last slide here, it's kind of a key point. This is a affidavit. It's called the Penrose Report. This is an affidavit being used inside of an ongoing lawsuit in the state of Michigan. You can go to the link here. You can pull this up, and you can see this document in full. And here you found Mr. Penrose identified. He opened up the machine and identified exactly where this wireless card is located on their motherboard. So again, who is ES&S? These are the people we're partnering with. We're expecting to trust them. But we have plenty of evidence to say that that is a bad choice. This would never happen, in business. In the businesses that I've worked in, building factories, you have to partner with an automation company to build these, to create the infrastructure to collect the data, but you don't give the whole system over to an outside firm. You have to have people internally that understand what's going on, how the data is being collected, how the algorithms are going to work. You don't share that information with outside people.
I'm probably going to have to give the last person
And
got about 6 minutes.
okay, with that, I guess my final parting words were, this election process is the baby of the Secretary of State and the Director of Elections. You're never going to hear them call this baby ugly, right? However, we the people are joint owners. Right? We have joint custody of this child. We don't want to call this baby ugly either, right? Because this is one of our most sacred systems in our country, right? Yet here we are, we believe our baby's beautiful, but we believe something stinks, right? And it's up to you, dear senators, to make change. You have to deal with the dirty work here and change the dirty diver here, so to speak. But with that, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Let's hold Missy, is it Levitt? Levitt? She's next, and you've got literally about 5 minutes or less.
Okay. Geez, I'm a lot shorter than everybody else. So really quick while I set this up for you guys to get it on your screen. My name is Missy Levitt. I am from Colby, Kansas. I do not have an extensive background to talk about my education. I'm a patriot, and I have been helping research all of this and bring it here to you today. There were very many attachments sent to you, so many that your assistant was not able to present them in copy form. So I'm sorry if it's not
I
displaying.
was looking for your button to switch the
Anything you
display.
have, if you want to resend, we'll make sure. and
Sure.
send them the-
And so, yes, those are available to you. There is attachments A through Q, but really quickly, I just wanted to go over the federal and state relationship here. Sorry. So you guys have, from the federal standpoint, since this committee is the federal and state,
He's got it.
he's going to do it for me. Okay. So the federal and state relationship for us is the HAVA Act, and the HAVA Act is at the federal level, of which we have a voluntary option to participate in that. But the shiny object with this HAVA and the federal part of it is the grant money that they allow us to spend. The EAC guidelines for certifications are mandatory and encompass the regulating voting system certification for all of the machines in our state. They also implement that the states maintain the statewide registration database, which is your Elvis, which is owned, operated, and built by ES&S here. Just so everyone knows, that's who built it, but that is who regulates it. It's all regulated at the federal level. Just for some clarity and transparency points on this slide, the rate of error which they do test all the machines to is very, very, very small. Also, the new machines versus modified machines, I have read all of these documents upside and down, and I'm trying to be as quick to present to you, but there is a difference to them as what's a new system and what is a modified system as far as how they test. And then the keeping up, of course, because the old systems, of which our systems are certified to, are from 2005, and that's when we all had flip phones, if anybody remembers those, but they are highly outdated. So the email transcripts on the next slide, I believe. I don't know how I just move forward here, so.
Did you change?
I don't know what this is in my screen.
Yeah, click that. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. So we have email transcripts, I'm so sorry. Email transcripts that prove 6 days prior to state certification here in our state. That was given in Rob's presentation. But the email transcripts prove that 6 days prior to our state certifying that the Johnson County voter histories report as well as the tabulators were not matching. And 6 days later, we certified. And this was something that was a discrepancy between Elvis, and that is dated, you'll see on November 20th through 24th, those emails were sent between the Secretary of State's office in Johnson County. The federal rate of error allowed by reporting also is described by American Military News in this December 14th, 21 article, of which 1 in 250,000 ballots, or a ratio of 0.0008, is allowed by the certifications at the federal level. A Michigan judge, Kevin Alzheimer, allowed the release of findings that their Dominion machines ran an error rate of 68.05%. That rate of error can only be audited using the ballot images, the cast vote records, and paper ballots. The digital information seems to be protected in our state from being open records in Kansas. And then we're not sure why, because there's no voter names on there, so we can't see how someone votes. But it is not an open records here in our state, so therefore not auditable by anybody unless a judge orders it. And simply put, the lack of transparency promotes concern and public distrust. This leads us to wonder if Johnson County should never have been certified. We must be able to keep up with the quickly changing capabilities of our technology and with these guidelines that they have.
Hey, Missy, we're really out of time.
Okay. Well,
know it's hard to
I'm
get
so
everything
unfortunate. I will say to you, you have a 1.0 certification, okay? There's 1.0, and this is all they certified to from 2005. And so I was told by the director of the EAC that our systems are modified and not new. And so I have a 2-sentence that I pulled out from the EAC report on the 6.0 system, which Johnson County has. And it says right there, this is a new system, therefore has no history. And these are 1,000 affidavits, just so you know, of the citizens of this state that are made out to Ty Masterson. And so we just wanted you to see what it looks like to have notarized concern from your constituents.
No, and we get it, and that's why we're here listening today.
Yeah, and we appreciate it. So I'm so sorry that we ran out of time because this ultimately is your guys' committee's direction, so.
We're not out of time, we're just out of time for today. And we're going to have a lot of election bills, so if you guys want to come up and, talk about them bills and the subjects.
Right.
That'll probably deal with some of the subjects that you guys are talking about. And so,
Well, we're happy to help with that. And as you all can tell, you have packets of stuff, and we have more. We have lots more, so please let us know if you need anything else.
I want to thank you guys for coming today.
Yes, thank you.
Have a good day. We're adjourned.